Welcome to today's 5-minute Bible study in the Gospel of John. We're in John chapter 19. We're looking at John's description of the crucifixion of Jesus. Now we're going to start reading today at verse 25. And in this next paragraph, John talks about the women who had gathered at the cross in Jesus' final moments as he gave himself for us. So, chapter 19, verse 25. Now near the cross of Jesus stood his mother, his mother's sister, Mary the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus saw his mother there, and the disciple whom he loved standing nearby, he said to her, "Woman, here is your son." And he said to the disciple, "Here is your mother." From that time on, this disciple took her into his own home. Okay, John describes 4 women who were at the cross. The first one he mentions, of course, is Mary, the mother of Jesus, standing there watching her son die on the cross. You know, I'm sure she must have remembered when he was a baby. You remember in Luke chapter 2, after Jesus was born, Mary and Joseph took Jesus to Jerusalem, to the temple, to dedicate him to the Lord. And you remember there was a man there, Simeon, who had been waiting to see the Messiah. The Lord had promised him that before he died, he would see the Messiah. And Simeon came to them and realized that Jesus was the one. He was the Messiah. And in verse 30, Simeon says, "My eyes have seen your salvation, O Lord, which you have prepared in the sight of all the nations, a light for revelation to the Gentiles." So he gave that prophetic word that Jesus is the light for the nations. He is the Messiah, the Son of God. Simeon went on to say, "This child is destined to cause the rising and falling of many in Israel." And then he says to Mary, "And a sword will pierce your soul too." And a sword will pierce your soul too. This is the moment at the cross. And perhaps Mary remembered what Simeon had said those years before, and she feels the sword piercing her soul as she sees her son dying on the cross. So Mary is there. It also says Mary's sister is there. Now, she's not named, or we're not exactly sure. There's been some speculation about who's been talked about here, but all we know is that Mary's sister is also there. It also mentioned another Mary, Mary the wife of Clopas. We don't exactly know who this is, but she was a follower of Jesus, and she is also at the cross. And then John also mentions that Mary Magdalene was at the cross. Now we know, of course, that Mary Magdalene was the one out of whom Jesus had cast 7 demons, setting her free. And she'd always been since then a follower of Jesus, and so we find her at the cross. So Mary, Jesus' mother, is there. Mary's sister is also there. Another Mary, the wife of Clopas, and another Mary, Mary Magdalene. They're at the cross as Jesus is dying for us. And then we see this very tender moment. Jesus looks at his mother and says, "Behold your son." But then it says he looks at the disciple standing nearby whom he loved. We know that's John himself. John, the author of this gospel. John was there. And he looks at John and says, "Here is your mother." You know, as the eldest son, Jesus is responsible for the care of his mother because Joseph is gone now. Joseph has already died at this time. So he passes that responsibility on to John. "Here's your mother. Take care of her and watch over her." And we're told John does that very thing. He takes her into his home and he cares for her. So we see this very tender moment at the cross with these 4 women, followers of Jesus all, who've stayed to the end, who've gathered at the cross to see as he gives his life for us, to be there with him. And we see this moment when Jesus takes care of Mary and gives the care of her over to the hands of his apostle, his disciple, John. All right, tomorrow we'll continue looking at the crucifixion and some of the last words that Jesus spoke from the cross. So join us next time for our 5-minute Bible study in the Gospel of John.